All right, this should work. Let me just put this here. So at least the mic will look good. Speaking of looking good, oh, look who we have today. It's a Peachy sighting. There she is. There she is. The little diva herself. Getting in on the action. There we go. Look at her. All right, Peachy. Hang out right there. All right. We got it. And let me just do a little more tweaking here. Not in the traditional sense of tweaking, by the way. All right. How is everybody? How are you? Uh, Interesting times, clearly. And well, but let's just do the weather. I don't need to. I don't need to do a spiel. Let me just get into the weather. Let's just get right into it. I hope everybody's having a great morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are, as we channel the highest expression of Pisces that we can, because we are now in Pisces season. Isn't that right, Peachy? Isn't that right? So one of the things about Pisces at its highest expression is beauty and unconditional love. That's really the highest expression of Pisces. Beauty, harmony, peace, selflessness, unconditional love. And it's one of the hardest things to reach in this lifetime is a sense of unconditional love. And a lot of people tend to think that unconditional love is soft, like the politicized version of unconditional love is extreme liberalism. That is the politicized version of it. Like that is what people have been socially and philosophically weaned on. That they'll just unconditionally love everybody and everything. And while the intention, I think, is good, the execution is often poor because their unconditionality is coming from a place of, in most cases, ideology, and not something completely baked into their neural network and their DNA and their heart. It's an ideological kind of stance around unconditional love. But very few people really, really get it. And the ones that do get it, well, you know, you're in the presence of somebody very profound, because it's not just kind of a gutchy heart with feelings and no boundaries. There's a lot of wisdom in unconditional love, right? A lot of wisdom that's part of it. So it's not just an emotional expression. It's a lot deeper than people really understand. But enough of that. Let's get into the weather. All right. Here we go. By the way, I've been diving into this oil stuff pretty intensely, and really looking at the rise of oil in not just the United States, but the world, but mostly the United States, because it really happens here more than any other place. And and again, this is just a bit of an aside, but if you saw Sunday Night Show, you know what I'm talking about. And almost like clockwork, that these centuries, they change. And when centuries change, big changes happen with centuries. I think midpoints of centuries and then also the centuries themselves. And in 1901, in fact, it was January 10th, 1901, the largest oil field in the United States, and at that time the world, was discovered in Beaumont, Texas. And the reason I'm talking about this because we're in Pisces season, and oil is definitely a Piscean commodity. And that oil find at Spindletop in Beaumont, Texas, changed the world. And it's from that uh, field that fuels the boom for Detroit and gas-powered engines. 1901 on the dot. Prior to that, they had discovered oil in places like Pennsylvania and New York and Ohio, which we covered a little bit on Sunday night. But what's interesting about those oil finds is that they were used primarily for heating and illuminating, meaning that they were burning oil to have, light at night. It was illuminating oil. And it really wasn't until this big oil find in 1901 in Beaumont that they had excess amounts of oil to begin to refine and produce huge amounts of petroleum. Anyway, it's Pisces season, so I've just been diving into this phenomenon with oil that we as a country and as a world have really adopted and embraced. And it's just, again, we're moving away from that now. We're moving into the age of electric. We're moving into the age of the power grid, more so than ever, right? Because they're getting rid of oil, which again brings us into Pluto and Aquarius. So anyway, I'm going to be doing more stuff around oil, and I feel like that there's also this connection with oil and black goo, and I got to delve a little bit deeper into that. But here we go. All right, Venus on the rise here, 1 degree away from Mars, and we've talked about this Venus Mars conjunction as it relates to the individual, right? And how Venus Mars gets played out through the individual's sexuality and their kind of demeanor, right? Their physical demeanor, which at times is feminine, at times is masculine. Sometimes in men with Venus and Mars, the Venus might be more prominent in a man, and the Mars might be more prominent in a woman. It's a fascinating conjunction. And again, most individuals that have the Venus Mars conjunction are imbued with a strange charisma. So it's coming up here, and it's in Aquarius, and it really feels like on a quote unquote mundane level or a social level, this has, I keep leaning into this, it's not even fucking working. This has all the earmarks of what looks like a strike, right? I mean, when we think of what's happening in New York and the truckers and not bringing stuff into New York, this is strike related material because unions are Aquarian. They're groups, and Mars tends to be very active, like proactive when it comes to things like this. And there's agreement here with Venus, and it has to do, like, there's no contracts involved, which is odd. There's no contracts involved. Really, what theoretically these truckers are supposedly striking for is Donald Trump. I mean, think about that. Trump got hit with a $300 million settlement suit. And all of a sudden now these truckers are coming to his aid and basically saying, we're going to bring New York to its knees by not bringing anything into the city. I don't know how this is going to get played out. Maybe they'll call it off. Maybe whoever is playing president in the White House calls a state of emergency and forces people to go through. Maybe they've federalized trucking. One of the things that I've been talking about in other podcasts is at some point seizing production. And as we move towards that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is at the end of 2025, that's one of the things that I've put on the table is the seizing of production and the nationalizing of certain industries, especially in the time of a crisis or a fake crisis, because that's when it would happen. And I think what we're looking at here with New York is kind of a test ground. And what would happen if all of a sudden, Kathy Hochul or Eric Adams, whoever in New York City, got on the phone with the White House and said, "Look, you have to seize trucking, and you have to hire drivers to come into New York and serve us," right? I mean, think about that for a second. And one of the things that has come to my attention is that out of any industry, trucking has had the most replacements by people from other countries, meaning quote unquote migrants. They're fast tracking migrants into the trucking trade. And again, Venus Mars conjunction. Is that where this is going? There was a time when the air traffic controllers under Reagan thought they had Reagan by the balls and said, "Well, listen, we'll strike and we'll bring the whole country to a halt." And he fired them all. I mean, they're federal employees. He fired them all and he replaced them very quickly. And it was kind of a major moment when the government just stepped in and said, "Fuck you. You have no leverage here. You're done." And for a lot of those guys, some of them got their jobs back eventually, but for a lot of those guys, it was a huge blow, and they had to retrain themselves or whatever. But we can see some of this here with Venus and Mars, and it would be a very convenient opportunity to flush a lot of people who drive a truck for a living, and then, oh, look, we got all these new people in here. Let's teach them how to drive these trucks. You see where I'm going with this? And it's very Aquarian too, in a lot of ways. We could virtue signal our hearts out with something like that. So these truckers, whoever is telling them to not bring goods. Again, this has been the talk over the last few days. I haven't looked at the news today. But who's ever telling them to do that, they need to really rethink that. Because if they're going to strike and not deliver goods to New York City, which is basically an island, you better make sure that you're doing it for more than just the $335 million that Trump has been told to pay out to the city of New York or whomever brought up the whole thing with the Trump Foundation and blah, 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 fucking blah, right? So that on the mundane tip, I think is what we're looking at here. We're looking at the aggregate energy of groups and social cause. And also in a weird way too, with Venus and Mars, you'll see like I've used the word before, strange bedfellows. And I think that that's all part of the Venus and Mars conjunction as well. So in your own life, right? Let's bring it down a few levels in your own life. What kind of partnerships arise in your own life where all of a sudden you find that you have something in common with somebody that you didn't think you'd have something in common with. That's what I'm talking about here. And it doesn't enter into the realm of unconditionality, but it does stretch one's limits as to who or what they think that they can trust, bond, relate, and agree with. Right. So we get some very unusual pairings here with Venus and Mars. And Jupiter, the Jupiter square, is also about opportunity. It's an opportunity for people with what looks like dissimilar interests come together and say, okay, we have this interest together, so let's do something about it now. Let's see what's on the table now. It's very interesting, very, very interesting. And again, this whole idea of striking and sort of grinding production to a halt is in the air. It's not just New York, it's Europe, it's places around the world, right? Where there's this huge tectonic shift coming around the economy and production that's on the way. All right, let's jump into Mercury. We're at 25 Aquarius, and it's coming out of this Uranus square, which is about shocking results, right? Or shocking pronouncements. And one of the things, I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview of 15 Minutes of Flame. Of course, there is a link to today's show in the show notes. I put it in there. And if Tom or one of the mods wanted to put that in to the chat, that would be great. But I ran across something that shocked me, and I'm going to get into more of it on 15 Minutes of Flame, but it has to do with the fact that there's a company and some lobby group that has decided to employ AI technology and do voice samples. So here's how AI works, right? Like you could take a voice sample of somebody, and then AI would clone that voice sample, and it's actually pretty good. I mean, it's getting better. There's weird little clips, and sometimes you can hear the weird little clips, but it's getting better and better and better, which is a scary thing. And what they've done is with in agreement with their surviving relatives, they've taken their cloned voice and written a script about gun control. So basically, they've used the dead voices of people to beseech lawmakers to ban the Second Amendment or curtail sales or whatever their strategy is, right? Like it's the weirdest fucking most macabre thing I've ever heard. And then what's next, right? Are they going to have the images of the people? Because they certainly can. All they need is an image, and then you have a voice clip and an image, and the next thing you know, you've got people lobbying for gun control from the dead. And the implications of this, to me, are quite startling. I'm going to get into more of that on 15 minutes. But this is when I heard about it, which was a couple days ago. Mercury was probably around like 23. So it was in a tighter square with Uranus. When I heard that, I was like, it's fucking shocking. It's just weird. Right. And we're gonna hear more things along these lines that it's really going to test what we're able to handle and what we're able to theoretically normalize. So we're still in this Mercury square where what we say or what we hear does have a jarring effect. And sometimes that jarring effect can be good and it could shake you up and wake you up. And sometimes the jarring effect can be traumatic. Now, luckily, Mercury is kind of moving on here. So it's moving into Pisces in the next 5 days. So our style of communicating is going to shift for the better or worse. Everything is relative with astrology. But with Pisces, the thing with Pisces is that it can get better in the sense that there's a high degree of empathy with Pisces. So when we speak, right, or when we're processing something on a mental level through Pisces, it's not just cold and kind of analytical and scientific that Aquarius can be. Aquarius can be very cut and dry, right? It can be very cold. It's like like the cold edge of a knife, but a sharp knife. Pisces is very different. And we lose that kind of objectivity with Aquarius, and we move into deeper subjectivity with Pisces. But I do believe it will be a bit of a welcome relief over the jarring and kind of harsh level of communication that's been going on over the past 10 days. I mean, I'm on Twitter, and man, Twitter has just been, it's been a riot on Twitter, and everybody's arguing about everything from Kyle Shanahan should have not taken the ball in overtime, as we told that plot over and over again, to whatever, right? Vegans versus meat. I mean, there's a lot of, caustic and very provocative and confrontational speech that's been going on and will continue to go on, although Mercury's separating a bit here until we get Mercury and it feels like it's more of a truce, sort of like, okay, bit of a laying down of arms here, and we get into a nice, ultimately, conjunction with the sun again, and of course, Mercury will begin to sextile Jupiter, sextile Uranus, and I'd really like the sextile with Jupiter. It feels very generous, and in a time where resources are getting harder to come by, maybe the best thing that you can do is be a bit more generous in some ways and see where it comes back to you. And I'm not saying, you open your pocketbook, to a migrant family or whatever, but it's something I'm thinking about and something I've been thinking about over the past couple of days. And, it might be something you may want to think about as well. And generosity isn't just resources, although we do get some of that, of course, with Jupiter and Taurus, but it's also your time, right? And it's, how you show up during those times. Like, can you put your cell phone down and be present, which is something I have to work on every now and then. Can you do those things? Can you be in the moment? And that is a degree of generosity, right? You're giving of yourself to the other in the moment without any expectation of reward, and at the same time without a buffer, meaning that you're present, right? You're present, and there's I think a tremendous reward here, and it may not result in a monetary reward, but it results in the ability to feel more connected to terra firma, and material values meet spiritual values, right? Jupiter and Taurus is the expansion of material values, and Pisces is really seeking spiritual value or spiritual connection. So I don't think the two are mutually exclusive here as Mercury moves into ultimately a trine with Jupiter. The sun is there, right? The sun is in trine with Jupiter. And, I'm sorry, sextile. These are sextiles. The sun is in sextile with Jupiter. So why not get into the practice of being generous with your time and your presence, and even your thoughts and your speech. It's going to be an interesting transition, especially about a week from now when Mercury moves into a tighter sextile with Jupiter. I like it. The way the world has been wired and configured, and we all get into it, and I get into it, is it's been wired and configured to be confrontational in some ways. And not saying that Pisces is an avoidance of confrontation, but it's a higher level of resolving confrontation or resolving conflict. And there's an expansion with Jupiter where it's like, you know what, this doesn't mean enough to me. This just doesn't mean enough to me. I'm gonna, I've got bigger battles to fight. I mean, that's kind of, the outcome of the Sun Jupiter sextile. You kind of rise above the pettiness, but you're doing it in a way where you're not sacrificing anything. It's like you just know, like, you know what, this isn't really worth my time. This isn't worth my time. And when you understand that, it frees your time and your expression up for something different. Like, you could expend all this energy on either worrying or defending or whatever things that you think you need to do in that moment. And really, if you had a different perspective, you say, this is just mice nuts. Let me raise my awareness to another level and deal with things that are much more appropriate, or much more prudent, or much more expansive in their nature. This is one of the big traps that they've really set up for all of us, is to get into these squabbles and to divide and conquer, and to use anything that's a minor provocation to make it into a major conflict. This has been an absolute, like, score for the social engineers. But in this configuration, we can reset things. We can redress the balance, and we can say, you know what? Not getting sucked in there. I've got better things to do. Whatever those better things are, right? Whatever those better things are. And the whole idea as we move into Pisces here is to move into flow. Now, we're still going to have some conflict going on with ultimately when Venus and Mars creep up on Uranus, but that's a ways out. I mean, they move a bit more slow than the Sun and Mercury. So as we move into Pisces, the whole idea of going with the flow is really what it's about. And especially because the flow leads into a greater connection with the material and natural world. So we've been in a very synthetic period, and still are to a large extent, with Aquarius, right? Aquarius is scientific and technological, but we have a bit of a shift towards the organic and the analog, which is great. So one of the things that I'm going to throw out there as a prescription for you guys and gals over the next couple of weeks, go out and see some live music. Go out and see, it sounds really mundane, but go out and see some live music. Go out and see some people play. That is an analog experience. Connect with the feeling of being with other people in a room. You don't have to drink, or if you drink, use your decisions wisely with Pisces for sure. But that would be my prescription. Get out of your house, go experience something. And Pisces is creative and musical, and it inspires us. It inspires us to live our lives from a higher perspective, to strive towards art, or to strive towards an emanation of the divine. So that's the upside of Pisces. So get into it. Eventually, it's all going to come up here. Sun-Saturn conjunction. The Sun-Saturn conjunction isn't as fun, right? Like, it isn't as fun as going out and kicking up your heels, but it's essential. It's an essential conjunction here, and for us, and we're about a week away from the exact conjunction. But if we split it in half, by the time we get to Friday, it's creeping up on Saturn. So Sun-Saturn conjunctions are very sober. They're extremely sober. There's a dispassion that goes along with Sun-Saturn. And it's in Pisces, it's a dispassionate stoicism that is in the air. And there is also a degree of orthodoxy. And what's interesting about that is it kind of shakes out the imitators, right? It shakes out the imitators. It shakes out philosophies or belief systems that feel shallow. It's kind of like, this is not deep enough for me. I need my well to be deeper. I need my water to be cleaner or more pure. I need my connection with source to be more structured and foundational, and even a part of my daily regimen. So we're coming up on this. And we've had these Sun-Saturn conjunctions before. I think we had one, was it last year? I think Saturn went into Pisces last year on March 8th, if I'm not mistaken. And I think at that time, the sun, that's my son's birthday. So I think it's around 15 degrees or something like that. So we haven't really had the Sun-Saturn conjunction since Saturn went into Pisces, right? Like, the sun had already crossed over Saturn, and it had been in Aquarius. So this is really the first Sun-Saturn conjunction in Pisces. So we're going to get a full dose of this, which we didn't get last year. And this is people really looking at sort of the state of the world and the state of their life and getting real nuts and boltsy about their relationship with God. Real nuts and boltsy. So that's coming. But it won't be a bad thing, right? Because still, Saturn's at 8 degrees. So there's that sextile with Jupiter at the same time. We're still talking about that sextile with Jupiter. And there's a reward there, right? There's a reward where, again, what we're looking for theoretically is an organizing principle, a belief system, a connection to something that makes us effective in this world, while at the same time prepares us for the next one. And to me, this is Taurus and Pisces in a nutshell. All right. We'll address more of that as we get closer to it. The moon is in Cancer. It's at 17 degrees. And as we move deeper into the transit of the moon today, it's going to get closer to Neptune. So we always like moon Neptune trines. Again, the theme here, which seems to be kind of the theme of today's stream, is kindness, right? Kindness and empathy and compassion. And we have a lot of harsh squaring going on over here, but we also have some deeper relief at the same time. Can you get into a squabble or an argument and then make up? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that I've learned over my time here is when you're wrong or you make a mistake, don't waste a lot of time, um, letting it sit. So, well, I'll admit it or I'll apologize to that person at some point. There's a reasonable amount of time when that kind of recognition actually means something and can spark and catalyze you to getting better. But if you hold on to it too long, it's like, you remember that thing that I did 3 months ago? Yeah, I realize it. I mean, better late than never is always, it's all, that's the maxim. But this is what we're talking about here. Like you can be out of line. Theoretically, you can go over the top. You can be, maybe a bit harsh. And at the same time, at least today and tonight, you can move into a space where, you know what, you can admit you were wrong if you need to, but it's not like, how do I say it? It's kind of like the sun sextile to Jupiter. It's this interesting combination of kind of admitting your faults, and it's not like you're being indemnified, but it feels right and it feels good, and it's like you're filling something that has been kind of empty, right? It's not like you're admitting your fault and you have to have a deficit in your life. Like, oh shit, man, I really fucked up. And that can be a very valuable lesson too, right? You don't want to have a lot of those. But this is more along the lines of, again, getting into the moment faster and not allowing things to drag you down. So if you have to, it's okay, right? There's enough emotional content today where you can just let go into it. The same thing can come at you, right? So the other side of the equation is that if you've held a grudge against somebody and finally they say, I was wrong or I apologize for that, do you want to hold on to that grudge a little while longer? Or do you want to be open to the fact that, this person actually means a lot more to me than my petty grudge? Doesn't mean you even have to let him back into your life. You can say, you know what, thank you for sharing that with me. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me. Doesn't mean you have to be, wedded at the hip after that, but it can be very healing. And that's the other side of the fence, right? Like sometimes we like to hold on to our our grievances. And when somebody offers up, you know, an olive branch, right? Accept it, especially if it comes from the heart, right? And you know that you can see that with people. And for some people, it's a very awkward kind of expression. So you got to give them a little bit of latitude and runway. We are in that moon square with Chiron, and that is the vulnerability that I'm talking about. That's the vulnerability I'm talking about, especially because again, when you get into Aries, Aries never fucking apologizes. Never, never. They never, rarely. And I'm not here to bag on Aries, but it's true. Rarely is there a sorry. And when you get it, you know it's a big deal. So we have this lunar square coming in. And it's like, okay, can you say it? Can you accept it? And if you can, that square heals things very quickly. The moon in Cancer is a bomb, BALM, a bomb to this conjunction. And in a perfect world, what do we want for the people that we love? We want them to be uh, whole and happy and positive and productive in whatever form of productivity that they want to pursue. We want those things because we want them for ourselves and for people that and there are people in this world that are pretty fucked up, right? Let's not sugarcoat this thing. There's some pretty fucked up people in this world, and at the same time, uh would the world be better if they weren't fucked up? Absolutely. Is it your responsibility to heal those people? No, it's not your responsibility. It's not. But if there was a moment where somebody in your life approached that kind of level of redemption, then you could accept it because it has a ripple effect through the world. And it's a close approximation of the most fucked up people you'll meet or not meet. You understand what I'm saying? Like, there's a way to go about it, and there's a way to connect with it. That's right in your own backyard. So I like today in general, and that's your Astro Weather. All right, today's True Hemp Science star of the day. Kind of long on the Astro Weather today. Today's True Hemp Science star of the day for True Hemp Science is your one-stop shop. Talking in the fucking mic doesn't work. One-stop shop for all things CBD. So if you go to truehempscience.com and type in 15MINS, that's 15MINS, you will get a free goodie bag with your purchase of $100 or more. $150 or more get you free shipping. And there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. And the reason why I promote this product is because I am convinced it is some of the best CBD you'll be able to use in your life and make it a daily practice of wellness. That's trimscience.com. Go support our friend Chris. And while you're at it, hit the like, hit subscribe, and if you feel like it, buy me a cup of coffee. All right, let's talk a little Patty Hearst. Little 5'4" Patty Hearst. And I was living in the Bay Area, of course, when Patty Hearst became a cause celeb, when she was abducted by the SLA from her apartment in Berkeley. I actually have the chart for that. If we have time, we'll put it up here. She was a rich girl, right? She was the daughter of the longest living member of the Hearst family, William Randolph Hearst, the fourth or the fifth or whatever, third or whatever he was. And this is the guy who ran the San Francisco Chronicle and Examiner. Hearst Publishing, huge deal. She's going to Berkeley. She's living with this guy, Stephen Weed. And I believe it was in January? What day is that? I got the chart here. Let's see, what is this? February 4th, 1971. The SLA comes to her Berkeley apartment, beats up her boyfriend, and abducts her. And she goes from being Patty Hearst to Tanya. That was her revolutionary name. So this is her posing. She looks like she's on fucking mind control, doesn't she? Her eyes are all vacant and shit. Look at that. Now she's posing as a revolutionary, and they also have a picture of her when the SLA decides that they're going to rob the Hibernia Bank, and she's on video as part of the fucking robbery, right? Like she is living the life here. She's living the life of a revolutionary bad girl. So what's interesting is the two names, Patty Hearst and then Tanya. And we see that with Gemini on the midheaven and Jupiter and Gemini in the 10th house. So she literally has two personalities or two personas that she goes by. What's interesting here is Pluto in the 12th house. And if you know anything about the SLA, the guy that was the quote unquote head of the SLA was somebody by the name of Donald DeFreeze, whose revolutionary name was known as SINQ, CINQUE. And apparently, Patty Hearst had visited Donald DeFreeze in prison about 6 months before all of this happened. So she was part of some kind of weird, liberal kind of outreach program where she was going to devote her time to social justice. And that's how she comes in contact with Donald DeFreeze. And I don't know what kind of plan they hatch, but the idea here is that they're going to kidnap her, they're going to ransom her, and turn her into a radical, which apparently they did a pretty good job of. I don't think Patty Hearst was playing the role, although she was playing the role. I think she went through some very serious mind control. And when you read stories about what happened with her with the SLA, she was put into a closet for they knew mind control techniques because Donald DeFreeze was working with a guy. What was his name? Colston. I forget his last name. But this guy was involved in Project Phoenix in Vietnam. And he had handpicked Donald DeFreeze out of the LA prison system to kind of run this thing. And so he knew all these mind control techniques. And so that was part of Donald DeFreeze's training. And that's what they did with Patty Hearst. And some of that was also sexual, right? So you get this Pluto opposition going on here with the sun. And it's more the sun than it is Venus. But you get into that Pluto opposition, and we get this, in conjunct with Chiron. There's a lot going on in Patty Hearst's 12th house. And that's where a lot of this stuff took place. It's in her 12th house. So also, when we look at Mars in the 4th house, it's violent. It's a violent aspect. And of course, what happens? Somebody comes to her home, snatches her, beats her boyfriend up, and takes her out. Right? That is a micro version of Mars in the 4th house. And Patty Hearst has Mars squaring the sun, squaring Venus. And, I think here when we get into Mars Sun squares, there's some temper obviously involved with that. But there's also a relationship to the father. And, perhaps this was Patty Hearst's, kind of wet dream of rebellion with the Mars Sun square. Remember, her father is a publisher, and Sagittarius rules publishing. So she's got Mars down there in the 4th house. And then also the square with Jupiter. We've got this Venus square with Jupiter and even this Mercury square with Jupiter. So the square with Jupiter is going to deal with things like her identity, right? Jupiter here in Gemini being the potential for more than one identity. And it's through a form of manipulation. Again, when you get into Pisces, you're dealing with boundaries, and the boundaries get really, really thin, right? So I feel like that there was a lot going on here with her and Pluto, and how this whole Pluto arrangement just reshaped her identity, her thinking. I mean, she looks like she's a fucking mind controlled slave here. It's like, what the fuck is going on? This is a really crazy time to be living in the Bay Area. There's all this crazy shit happening. Um, and I can see where her second house kind of resembles a bit of a social justice house. Moon in Libra, Neptune. We talked about unconditionality with Neptune. Second house. I think Patty Hearst somehow was trying to be a bit of a do-gooder, right? Everybody deserves a chance. And then she got caught up in something that was way above her ability to impact social. It would be really weird to sit down and talk to her about this whole chapter in her life. And nobody's ever really done an interview with her about any. I'd be surprised how much she actually remembers of it. And she was on the run for a while. That's the other thing. She managed to miss out on the big firefight in LA when the SLA was just burned out of their home, this home they were staying in. I watched that on TV, by the way, as a kid. And then she got probation, and she was supposed to do like 20 years in prison, but she didn't. That never happened with her. When I worked at Walgreens Drugs in Belmont, California, she used to live there. She used to live in Belmont, so she would come in from time to time, and word would go through the store. Hey, Patty Hearst is here. Patty Hearst is in. And I think one time I even like rang up her fucking shit one day, right? And she was, and what do you do? Hey, Tanya. Hey, Tanya, how's it going? Um, just be respectful, I guess. And she was with Bernard Shaw, who was her husband, and he was the bodyguard that was assigned to her after. Even that is kind of. I'm not saying that Bernard Shaw was, part of the mind control, right? But even having a relationship on the other side of this, coming out of trauma, right? Like she marries this guy who's basically hired to be her bodyguard. And to her credit, they stayed together and they've been together since. So there's your True Hemp Science star of the day, Patty Hearst, aka Tanya. All right. I want to thank everybody for being here. We do have a link to 15 minutes over in the notes, the show notes. And we're going to get into this whole weird phenomenon of appropriating the dead and using them for as a political tool. It's really weird, but it's very Aquarian. And it goes back to Friday's show when I was talking about the Aeon and the judgment card. And part of that card has people being raised from the dead. And like, I think it was yesterday that I read about this. So we're going to see a lot more of that when it comes to AI. And we're going to be reanimating the dead as part of this technological experience, for better or worse. It's going to be kind of creepy. That's what I think. All right. Take good care and have yourself a great day, blessed day. We'll be back here tomorrow. Check in on the Astro Weather as we move through that Cancer moon. Get ready to have that wacky Gemini moon, and we'll go from there. Take care. Bye for now. Have a great day.